The transition happened without warning. One moment, Gabriel stood in the silver halls of heaven, his golden horn gleaming at his side. The next, reality twisted around him like a wet cloth being wrung dry. Colors bled into each other. Sounds stretched and compressed. Then he was falling through darkness that pressed against his skin like cold oil. He landed hard on rusted metal that groaned under his weight. The impact should have shattered bones, but his divine nature protected him. Gabriel rose slowly, wings folding against his back as he took in his surroundings. Darkness pressed in from all sides, broken only by flickering chemical lights that cast sickly green shadows across towering walls of corroded steel. The air tasted wrong. Bitter chemicals mixed with human waste, and something else. Something that made his divine senses recoil. Despair hung in the atmosphere like invisible smoke, so thick he could almost touch it. This was not Earth. This was not any realm he had visited in. His long service to the presence. Voices echoed through the metal corridors, harsh and violent. Gabriel moved toward them, his bare feet silent on the grated floors. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the sounds of weapons firing and bodies hitting metal. He turned a corner and froze. Two groups of humans faced each other across a wide chamber carved from the underbelly of a structure so massive Gabriel could not comprehend its full size. On one side stood men, each over 7 feet tall, with muscles bulging grotesquely beneath their skin. They wore crude armor welded directly onto their bodies, pipes and tubes pumping chemicals into their bloodstreams. Their eyes showed only rage. On the other side stood women, lithe and quick, covered in toxin-marked blades and syringes. Their faces were painted with death symbols, and when they moved, they flowed like water around obstacles. Both groups fired weapons that spat explosive rounds the size of Gabriel's fist. Between them lay the dead, dozens of bodies, torn apart by the violence. Some were still breathing, gurgling their last moments away on the blood-slicked floor. Gabriel's heart broke at the sight. These were children of the Creator, lost and drowning in hatred. He stepped into the open space between the warring gangs, his wings spreading wide, white feathers catching the green light. "Stop," he called out, his voice carrying divine authority that had ended wars in other realms. "Please, there is no need for this violence. Put down your weapons, and I will help you find peace." The effect was immediate, but not what Gabriel expected. Both sides ceased firing, but not in surrender. Every weapon turned toward him instead. The massive men looked at him with confusion that quickly turned to territorial anger. The women studied him with calculating eyes that measured him as a threat or resource. "What house you with, pretty bird?" One of the giant men growled, his voice distorted by chemical rage pumping through. His system. "You Escher's new pet? Some kind of mutant? I serve no house but heaven," Gabriel replied, keeping his hands open and non-threatening. "I am Gabriel, herald of the presence. I have come to help you." The women laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Their leader, a tall woman with scars crossing her face in ritual patterns, stepped forward. "Heaven! There's no heaven in the Underhive, Angel Boy. There's only survival. And you just walked into our territory?" "Then I walked into both your territories," Gabriel said, gesturing to encompass both groups. "And I tell you truly, this fighting serves no purpose. You are all human, all deserving of grace and redemption. Whatever feud divides you can be healed." The giant man raised his weapon, a massive gun covered in kill markings. "The only thing getting healed is gonna be the hole I blow through you." He fired. The explosive round crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. Gabriel raised his hand, and the bullet stopped in. Mid-air, hanging motionless 3 inches from his palm, the chamber fell silent except for the hum of machinery deep in the walls. Gabriel closed his hand, and the bullet clattered harmlessly to the floor. "I do not wish to fight you," he said, "but I cannot allow this killing to continue." Both gangs opened fire at once. Hundreds of explosive rounds filled the air between them and Gabriel. He had no choice. Gabriel brought the golden horn to his lips and blew a single note. The sound that emerged was not heard by ears alone. It resonated through reality itself. a tone of such perfect clarity that it seemed to make the universe pause to listen. The bullets stopped. The gang members froze mid-motion. Even the flickering lights steadied in their housings. Gabriel had stopped attacks before, deflected weapons, slowed aggressors in their tracks. But never this. Never frozen time across an entire chamber. The Horn's power surged beyond anything he had attempted, responding to his desperate need with capabilities he had never explored. He walked among the frozen figures, looking at their faces locked in expressions of rage and pain. So much anger, so much suffering. These people had been broken by something, twisted into these violent shapes by forces Gabriel did not yet understand. He touched the horn to his lips again, preparing to release them, when he noticed something wrong. Where the horn's sound had passed through the air, the fabric of reality showed strain. Tiny cracks, invisible to normal eyes, but glaring to Gabriel's divine sight, spider-webbed through the space around him. The laws of this universe were different from his own, and his power was interacting catastrophically with the fundamental structure of existence itself. Before he could process this, the cracks began to spread, and from beyond them, something noticed him. Gabriel felt the attention like a physical weight. Something vast and hungry turned its gaze toward the breach he had accidentally created. Behind reality, separated by the thinnest membrane, an ocean of madness pressed against existence, colors that had no names, emotions given physical form. The raw stuff of nightmares made manifest, the warp. Though Gabriel did not know the name yet, he felt its terrible nature. This was not the neat separation between heaven and hell he understood. This was something far worse, a dimension where physical laws drowned in an endless sea of thought and emotion and corruption beyond anything he had encountered. The frozen gang members began to move again, but wrongly. Their bodies twitched and spasmed. Several collapsed, blood running from their eyes and ears. Others screamed sounds no human throat should produce. The cracks in reality widened, and through them, Gabriel glimpsed impossible geometries and entities that defied description. Panic seized him. He blew the horn again, trying to seal what he had opened. The divine sound pushed against the cracks, forcing them closed. But the damage was done. 15 gang members lay dead, their brains liquefied by brief exposure to the warp. Another dozen writhed on the ground, minds shattered by things they had glimpsed through the tears in space. Gabriel stared at his hands in horror. He had come to save these people. Instead, his first act in this universe had killed them. The horn that had always been his greatest gift, the instrument through which the presence's grace flowed, had become a weapon of destruction. He did not understand the rules here, and his ignorance had cost innocent lives. The surviving gang members fled in all directions, their war forgotten in the face of greater terror. Gabriel stood alone among the dead and dying, his horn feeling heavy as lead in his grip. Above, in the towering spires that reached toward the planet's polluted sky, sensors detected the reality distortion. Servitors logged the data with mechanical precision. Astropaths felt the brief pulse of impossible energy and reported it through proper channels. Within the hour, the information reached an Inquisitor's desk. Covenant read the report 3 times, his augmented eyes scanning for any detail he might have missed. A localized time stop in the Underhive. Multiple casualties from what appeared to be warp exposure, but without any corresponding demonic manifestation. And at the center, eyewitness accounts of a winged figure wielding a golden horn. He set down the data slate and looked out over Hive Primus, the massive city structure that housed billions of souls. Something new had entered his jurisdiction. Something that could affect time itself and tear holes in reality without being obviously corrupted by chaos. Something that did not fit any category in the Inquisition's extensive archives of threats. Covenant activated his Vox communicator. "Assemble my retinue," he ordered. "Full combat loadout. We hunt something that may be Saint or Daemon, and we will not know which until we have it in custody." In the Underhive, Gabriel knelt among the bodies. He tried to pray, to reach out to the presence for guidance, but his connection to heaven felt stretched and distorted, like trying to hear a whisper through a roaring waterfall. Wherever he was cut off from the divine light that had always guided him. The horn lay across his lap, its golden surface unmarred, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. One of the wounded gang members grabbed his ankle with a bloody hand. The woman looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much, eyes that would never fully recover from what they had witnessed through the cracks in reality. "What are you?" she gasped. "I am Gabriel," he replied, tears streaming down his face. "And I fear I have made a terrible mistake." Gabriel spent 3 days moving through the underhive, trying to help where he could. He found families huddled in the darkness, children with swollen bellies from starvation, old people left to die in corners because they could no longer work. Each time he used the horn, he did so with extreme care, producing only the softest notes to heal wounds or purify poisoned water. But even these gentle uses left him uneasy. He could feel reality straining around him, like a rope pulled too tight. Word spread faster than plague through the lower levels. An angel had come to the underhive. A being with golden wings who could heal the sick and perform miracles. The desperate began seeking him out, following rumors and whispers through the metal warrens. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Gabriel tried to help them all. He healed a child's twisted leg with a touch. He played soft notes on his horn that cleaned infection from festering wounds. He spoke words of comfort to those who had. Forgotten kindness existed, but for every person he helped, 10 more appeared. They grabbed at his robes, his wings, his hands. They begged and pleaded and demanded. The weight of their suffering crushed down on him like a physical force. On the 4th day, Inquisitor Covenant found him. Gabriel was surrounded by a crowd of 5,000 desperate people in a massive chamber that had once been a water processing plant. The Inquisitor arrived with 20 armed soldiers, each carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They formed a perimeter, pushing the crowd back with electrified shields. Covenant himself was a tall man with half his face replaced by metal. His right eye glowed with red light, scanning Gabriel from head to toe. When he spoke, his voice came through a vox amplifier that made it echo across the chamber. "Identify yourself, entity. By the authority of the Holy Inquisition, you will submit to questioning." Gabriel stepped forward, his wings folding respectfully. Behind him, "I am Gabriel Hornblower, Herald of the Presence. I mean no harm to anyone. I only wish to help these people." "Help," Covenant repeated, the word dripping with suspicion. "Our reports indicate you caused 15 deaths and drove a dozen more insane during your first appearance. What manner of help is that?" Shame colored Gabriel's features. "That was an accident. I did not understand the nature of this place. The barrier between dimensions here is thin in ways I have never encountered. My power interacts badly with the laws of your reality. Your power." Covenant moved closer, his soldiers maintaining their defensive formation. "Explain its nature. From where does it originate?" "From heaven," Gabriel said simply. "From the grace of the Presence, who created all things." The reaction was immediate. Several soldiers made religious gestures, touching symbols on their armor. Others tightened their grips on their weapons. Covenant's mechanical eye whirred as it focused more, intently on Gabriel. "There is only one divine power in this universe," Covenant said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "The God Emperor of mankind. To claim otherwise is heresy of the highest order." "I do not know your Emperor," Gabriel replied, "but I know the Presence. I have stood in heaven's halls and received my purpose directly from the source of all creation. I am what I appear to be, an angel sent to bring hope and healing. Nothing is what it appears to be," Covenant countered, "especially not in this universe. You will come with us for examination. If you resist, we will use lethal force." Gabriel looked at the crowd of desperate people behind him, then back at the Inquisitor. "And if I come willingly, will these people be safe? Will you feed them, shelter them, care for them?" Covenant's expression did not change. "They will receive whatever the Imperium deems they have earned through their service and compliance. Now, will you come peacefully?" Before Gabriel could answer, a woman pushed through the crowd. She was young, maybe 20 years old, with the mark of hive scum on her ragged clothes. She carried something wrapped in dirty cloth. When she reached Gabriel, she fell to her knees and unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a baby, no more than a few months old. The child was not breathing. Her small face was blue, her tiny body cold and stiff. "Please," the woman sobbed. "They said you could do miracles. They said you brought back the dead. Please, she's all I have. Please." Gabriel's heart shattered. He knelt beside the woman, looking down at the innocent life that had been stolen by this cruel world's indifference. Around him, the crowd fell silent. Even Covenant soldiers stopped their advancing, watching to see what would happen. "Death is the Presence's domain alone," Gabriel said gently, placing his hand on the woman's shoulder. "I have never attempted to reverse it. That power belongs to the Creator, not to his servants. Please," the woman repeated, the word breaking on her lips. "Please." Gabriel looked into her eyes and saw the same bottomless grief he had witnessed 1,000 times across 1,000 worlds. Loss was universal. Love was universal. And sometimes, mercy required breaking rules. Sometimes compassion meant stepping beyond the boundaries of what was permitted. He lifted the horn to his lips, knowing he was about to attempt something he had never done before. He played a single, pure note, pouring every ounce of divine grace he could channel through the instrument. The sound washed over the dead child like golden light made audible. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the baby gasped, her small chest heaving as life returned to her body. Color flooded back into her face. Her eyes opened, and she began to cry with the angry wail of a healthy infant. The woman clutched her daughter to her chest, sobbing with joy and disbelief. The crowd erupted in shouts of amazement and praise. They pressed forward, hundreds of hands reaching toward Gabriel, voices calling out for their own miracles. Covenant's mechanical eye blazed brighter. "Impossible," he whispered. "Resurrection is the sole province of the God Emperor. Only he can return life to the dead." Gabriel stood, exhausted by the effort and shaken by what he had accomplished. "I told you, I serve the Presence, but even I did not know if such a thing was possible here. Your universe fights against my nature at every turn." "Then you have just condemned yourself," Covenant said. He raised his hand, and his soldiers leveled their weapons. "Only 3 possibilities explain what I just witnessed. Either you are a saint touched by the Emperor's own power, a daemon wearing a false face, or something else entirely, something outside our understanding of the divine. Regardless, you come with me now." The crowd surged forward, trying to protect Gabriel. The Inquisitor's soldiers fired warning shots into the air. The thunderous sounds of bolt weapons echoed through the chamber. People screamed and fled. In the chaos, Gabriel spread his wings and lifted into the air, rising above the violence. "I will come with you," he called down to Covenant. "But please, do not harm these people. They have suffered enough. Land now," Covenant commanded, "or I will order my men to fire into the crowd until you comply." The cruelty of the threat shocked Gabriel. These were the authorities of this world? These were the protectors of humanity? He descended slowly, landing before the Inquisitor with his hands raised in surrender. Covenant produced a collar of dark metal covered in strange symbols. When he clamped it around Gabriel's neck, the angel felt his connection to the divine dim further. The collar was cold against his skin, and it hummed with a sound that made his teeth ache. A null collar. Covenant explained, "It will suppress any warp-based abilities. If you are what you claim, if your power truly comes from outside our intuits, reality's laws, it should not affect you completely. If you are a daemon drawing power from the Imperium, it will bind you." They took him from the underhive in chains, the crowd following behind, chanting prayers and pleas. Gabriel looked back at them with sorrow. He had come to help, and instead, he had given them false hope, in a universe that seemed designed to crush such things. The journey to Ophelia 7 took 2 weeks aboard a massive ship that traveled through the warp in ways that made Gabriel physically ill. The ship's Geller field protected them from the worst of it, but Gabriel could feel the screaming chaos beyond the barrier, clawing to get in. The ocean of madness he had glimpsed through the cracks in reality surrounded them on all sides, pressing against the thin bubble of sanity that kept them alive. Ophelia 7 was a world dedicated entirely to faith. From orbit, Gabriel could see structures so massive they dwarfed mountains, reaching kilometers into the sky. Every surface was covered in religious imagery, statues of armored warriors, and symbols of the double-headed eagle that seemed to represent this Imperium. This was one of the two greatest shrine worlds of the ecclesiarchy, second only to Terra itself in religious significance. They brought him before the ecclesiarchy in chains. The chamber was vast beyond reason, its ceiling lost in shadows 100 meters above. Thousands of priests filled the space, their voices rising in hymns that echoed off stone walls. At the far end sat the cardinals, 5 ancient figures draped in robes of crimson and gold. Cardinal Vasilia, the eldest, studied Gabriel with eyes that had witnessed centuries of service. "Remove the collar," she commanded. "If this being is a daemon, we have sufficient protection here. If it is a saint, we insult the Emperor by binding it." Covenant hesitated, but obeyed. The moment the collar came off, Gabriel felt his connection to the divine return like a rushing river. He gasped with relief, his wings spreading involuntarily. "Gabriel Hornblower," Vasilia's voice carried across the vast space without amplification. "You stand accused of heresy most foul. You claim power equal to the God Emperor himself. You perform miracles without sanction. You speak of a heaven separate from his light. What say you to these charges?" Gabriel straightened, meeting her gaze. "I say that I speak only truth. I am an angel of the presence. My power comes from the Creator of all existence. I have broken no laws because I knew no laws to break. I have only tried to help those who suffer." "The road to damnation is paved with good intentions," another cardinal intoned. "The great enemy often wears the face of mercy to corrupt the faithful." "I am no enemy," Gabriel insisted. "Test me however you wish. Examine my nature. You will find no corruption, no deception. I am what I appear to be." "Then, prove it," Vasilia said. She gestured, and priests brought forward a sister of battle. The woman was dead, her body laid out on a stone slab. "This warrior died in service to the Emperor just yesterday. If your power is genuine and holy, resurrect her. If you succeed, we will consider the possibility that you are a living saint. If you fail or produce something corrupted, we will destroy you where you stand." Gabriel approached the body slowly. The sister of battle had been beautiful in life, her face peaceful despite the massive wound that had killed her. He could see where an alien blade had pierced her heart, ending her life instantly. "This is not meant to be a test," Gabriel said quietly. "Life and death are sacred. They should not be used to prove a point. Everything in this universe serves the Emperor's purpose," Vasilia replied. "If you are his instrument, then this act glorifies him. If you are not, then your failure reveals your true nature. Proceed." Gabriel placed his hand on the sister's cold forehead and closed his eyes. He reached deep within, himself, to the core of divine grace that defined his existence. He brought the horn to his lips and played a melody of resurrection, each note a prayer, each tone a plea to the presence for mercy. He was pushing his abilities into territory he had never explored, asking the horn to channel powers that might not even exist in this harsh universe. The body began to glow with soft golden light. The wound in her chest sealed itself, flesh knitting back together. Color returned to her face. Her chest rose with breath. Her eyes opened, and she sat up with a gasp. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some priests fell to their knees in worship. Others screamed accusations of witchcraft and warp corruption. The cardinals conferred urgently among themselves while the resurrected sister looked around in confusion. "I died," she said, her voice hoarse. "I felt my spirit leave. I was going to join the Emperor at his side. Then I was pulled back. Why? Why would you deny me that honor?" Gabriel had no said answer. In his universe, life was always precious, always worth saving. But here, death in service to their Emperor was seen as the highest achievement. He had saved her life, but stolen her reward. The rules were different, and every attempt to do good seemed to create new suffering. Before anyone could speak further, the massive doors of the cathedral exploded inward. Reality tore like wet paper, and through the breach came horrors that Gabriel recognized from his brief glimpse through the cracks in the underhive. Daemons of Tzientch, creatures of impossible geometry and ever-changing form, poured into the sacred space. Their bodies shifted and morphed with each movement, their voices speaking in tongues that caused ears to bleed. The architect of fate sends his greetings, one of the creatures said, its form settling into something almost bird-like, but fundamentally wrong. The reality shaper has been found. The great schemer desires it for his collection. The priests scattered in schemer. Panic. The cardinals activated defensive measures, and holy light blazed from relics positioned throughout the chamber. Sisters of battle appeared from side entrances, their weapons firing sanctified rounds into the demonic horde. Gabriel stood frozen, watching the carnage unfold. These creatures were like nothing he had faced before. They were not simply evil beings from a hell dimension. They were concepts given form, ideas made flesh through the belief and emotion of living beings. They existed partially outside the physical laws he understood. A daemon lunged at him, its form splitting into a dozen crystalline shards that reformed around him. Gabriel raised his horn instinctively and blew a defensive note. The sound hit the daemon and passed through it harmlessly. Instead, reality rippled outward from Gabriel, and more cracks appeared in the fabric of space. Through those cracks, more daemons pushed through, drawn by the instability Gabriel's power created. He was making it worse. Every time he used the horn in this universe, he weakened the barrier that kept the warp at bay. His very attempts to defend himself were opening doorways for the enemy. Gabriel stumbled backward as daemons poured through the rifts his horn had created. The beautiful cathedral transformed into a battlefield painted in blood and impossible colors. Sisters of battle formed defensive lines, their bolters roaring as they poured blessed ammunition into the crystalline horrors. Priests chanted prayers that created barriers of shimmering light, but the daemons simply changed their forms to slip between the defenses like water through cracks. Inquisitor Covenant appeared at Gabriel's side, his power sword blazing with electrical energy. "Stop using that horn," he commanded, cutting down a daemon that had gotten too close. "Every time you blow it, you make this worse." "I was only trying to defend myself," Gabriel protested, watching in horror as 3 more rifts opened where his defensive blast had struck the walls. Smaller daemons crawled through, cackling with voices that sounded like breaking glass. "Your intentions mean nothing," Covenant growled, decapitating another creature. "In this universe, good intentions kill just as surely as malice. You are a walking breach in reality. The warp is drawn to you like moths to flame." Gabriel looked at his horn, the divine instrument that had served him faithfully across countless worlds. Here, it was a weapon of destruction. Every note he played damaged the fabric of space itself. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was not a savior in this place. He was a catastrophe waiting to happen. A daemon lord materialized in the center of the chamber, towering 3 times the height of a man. Its body constantly shifted between forms, at one moment appearing as a great bird made of crystal and flame, the next as a writhing mass of eyes and mouths. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "Gabriel Hornblower," it said, and hearing his true name from such a creature made Gabriel's divine essence recoil. "The changer of ways has watched your stumbling progress through this reality with great amusement. You are a catalyst, a key that opens doors which should remain shut. Tzientch desires to study you, to understand how your power operates outside the rules of this universe." "I serve only the presence," Gabriel declared, gripping his horn tighter, despite knowing he could not use it. "No dark power will claim me." The daemon laughed, and the sound made reality ripple like water. "Dark? Light? These are arbitrary distinctions. Your presence and our gods are different faces of the same cosmic truth. Power exists, and those with will enough shape it to their design. You are power unbound by the laws of this place. You are chaos given angelic form." "That is a lie," Gabriel insisted. But doubt crept into his voice. The daemon's words carried a terrible logic. His power did create chaos here. His attempts to help caused suffering. What was the difference between his miracles and the reality-warping madness of these creatures? Cardinal Vasilia's voice cut through the chamber, amplified by ancient technology woven into the cathedral's structure. All servants of the Emperor form the sacred circle. We perform the rite of banishment. Throughout the cathedral, surviving priests and warriors moved into precise positions. They began chanting in unison, their voices creating harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. The Daemon Lord's form flickered and wavered as the ritual's power pressed against it. Clever, the daemon observed without concern, but insufficient. This holy ground is already compromised by the angel's presence. His divine nature is antithetical to your Emperor's light. They cannot coexist in the same space without creating instability. As if to prove the daemon's point, the floor beneath Gabriel began to crack. Golden light leaked upward from the fissures, but it was wrong, twisted. The Emperor's psychic energy and Gabriel's heavenly grace were colliding, and the result was neither holy nor demonic, but something between, something that reality itself rejected. Get him out of here, Vasilia commanded. The creature speaks truth. The angel's presence prevents our rituals from working properly. Covenant grabbed Gabriel's arm and dragged him toward a side exit. Behind them, the Daemon Lord laughed as its smaller servants swarmed over the defensive lines. Gabriel looked back to see Sisters of Battle dying, their faith-powered armor no match for creatures that existed partially outside physical law. I have to help them, Gabriel said, pulling against Covenant's grip. You cannot help them, the Inquisitor snapped. You are the problem. Every moment you remain makes their situation worse. The best thing you can do is leave, and hope the ecclesiarchy can contain what you unleashed. They ran through corridors of stone, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Gabriel's wings dragged on the ground, too heavy with shame to lift properly. How had this happened? How had his purpose, his very nature, become so corrupted by this universe's cruel physics? They emerged onto a landing platform where a small ship waited. Covenant pushed Gabriel aboard and sealed the hatch. Within minutes, they were airborne, rising above the massive cathedrals toward the black of space. Through the viewport, Gabriel watched as the cathedral where he had been judged began to collapse. Spires that had stood for thousands of years crumbled into dust. The ritual circle had failed. The daemons were loose on a world dedicated entirely to faith. And it was his fault. Where are you taking me? Gabriel asked quietly. Away from population centers, Covenant replied, working the ship's controls with mechanical precision. The Conclave of Cardinals has declared you excommunicate traitores. You are to be destroyed on sight by any Imperial forces. They believe you are either a daemon wearing an elaborate disguise, or something worse, a weapon created by the ruinous powers specifically to undermine the foundations of faith. But I am neither of those things, Gabriel protested. I am exactly what I appear to be. That is what makes you so dangerous, Covenant said, and for the first time, Gabriel heard something other than suspicion in the Inquisitor's voice. Regret, perhaps, or pity. If you were simply a daemon, we would know how to fight you. But you are something. This universe has no framework to understand. Your very existence violates the theological principles that hold the Imperium together. The ship shuddered as they entered the warp, and Gabriel felt the ocean of madness press against the Geller field with renewed hunger. The daemons could sense him even through the protective barrier. They whispered promises and threats in languages that bypassed his ears entirely, speaking directly to his consciousness. Join us, angel of false heaven, they whispered. Accept your true nature. You are change incarnate, evolution beyond stagnation. You are perfect for the great schemer's design. Gabriel pressed his hands over his ears, though he knew it would do no good. The voices came from inside his own thoughts now, sliding between his memories and beliefs like oil between water. They showed him visions of himself as a champion of Tzientch, using his horn to reshape reality according to the architect of fate's grand design. In the visions, he saved billions by unmaking the cruel laws that governed this universe. No, Gabriel whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. The visions were seductive because they offered what he wanted most, the power to truly help. If he accepted the daemon's offer, he could change this entire universe. He could make it more like his own, where mercy existed, where kindness mattered, where every life had value. You are weakening, Covenant observed, watching Gabriel struggle. The warp corruption has begun. Your thoughts are no longer entirely your own. I can resist, Gabriel insisted. But even as he spoke, he felt parts of his certainty crumbling. What was certainty anyway, but another form of stagnation? What was faith, but refusal to accept change? The questions were not his own, but he could not tell where his thoughts ended, and the warp's influence began. The ship suddenly lurched sideways, alarms blaring throughout the small cockpit. Covenant cursed and began evasive maneuvers. Through the viewport, Gabriel saw other ships pursuing them. But these vessels were wrong. Their hulls covered in eyes that blinked independently, their weapons ports opening and closing like mouths. Chaos warband. Covenant identified them. They must have been waiting for us to enter the warp. Someone told them exactly when and where we would translate. The pursuing ships opened fire. Energy beams that shifted color as they traveled crossed the distance between vessels. Covenant ships shook as the shields absorbed the impacts. Warning lights flashed across every surface of the cockpit. We cannot outrun them, Covenant stated flatly. And I cannot fight them alone. You must help, or we both die here. I cannot use the horn, Gabriel said desperately. You saw what happened. I will only make things worse. Then we are dead, Covenant replied, continuing his evasive maneuvers despite knowing they were futile. Another volley struck the ship, and this time, the shields failed. Alarms screamed as hull breaches opened in 3 different sections. Gabriel closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself for guidance. He prayed to the presence, begging for wisdom, for direction, for any sign of what he should do. But the connection remained stretched and distant, drowned out by the screaming chaos of the warp around them. One of the pursuing ships fired a boarding torpedo. The projectile punched through the weakened hull and lodged itself in the cargo bay. Through the ship's internal sensors, Covenant watched as armored figures emerged from the torpedo. They wore power armor covered in symbols that hurt to look at, directly. Chaos Space Marines, former defenders of humanity who had turned to worship of the dark gods. They are coming for you, specifically, Covenant said. They want to deliver you to their sorcerer lord. The boarders cut through the internal doors with weapons that burned with warp fire. Gabriel could hear their chanting growing louder as they approached the cockpit. The words were in languages that had never been meant for human throats, prayers to entities that fed on suffering and change. Gabriel made his decision. He would not let Covenant die because of him. He would not allow himself to become a tool of chaos. If his power was too dangerous to use, if his very existence threatened this universe's stability, then there was only one choice left. He raised the horn to his lips and played the loudest, clearest note he had ever produced. But this time, he directed all of the horn's reality-warping power inward at himself. If he was the problem, then he would remove himself from the equation. The note echoed through multiple dimensions at once. Reality screamed as Gabriel forced his essence to disconnect from the physical universe. He was attempting something no angel had ever done, something that went against his fundamental nature. He was trying to unmake his own divine connection while remaining physically present. The pain was beyond description. It felt like having his soul torn out piece by piece. But Gabriel held the note, kept pushing, determined to see it through. If he could cut himself off from the presence entirely, perhaps his power would stop interacting catastrophically with this universe's physics. The pursuing chaos ships suddenly stopped firing. Their sensors had detected the massive reality distortion Gabriel was creating. The sorcerer lord aboard the lead vessel watched in fascination as readings climbed beyond measurable limits. He is attempting auto-negation. The sorcerer breathed, his voice filled with academic interest. Seeks to destroy his own divine nature. If he succeeds, the backlash could create a stable warp rift large enough to swallow this entire sector. Gabriel did not hear these words. He was lost in the agony of self-destruction, holding the horn's note with the last of his fading strength. Around him, space began to fold in on itself. The ship's structure groaned and warped. Covenant felt his own atoms beginning to pull apart. At the last possible moment, something else intervened. A presence so vast it made even the chaos god seem small crashed into the region of space where Gabriel floated. For the first time in recorded Imperial history, the Emperor manifested his will directly across the void. Golden light blazed through the warp, burning away the corruption with the fury of a star going nova. What was happening had not occurred in 10,000 years, a miracle on a scale not witnessed since the earliest days of the Imperium. The pursuing chaos ships simply ceased to exist, unmade by power that rewrote the fundamental rules of their being. The daemons that had been whispering in Gabriel's mind fled screaming back into the depths of the Imperium. Even the Sorcerer Lord, protected by powerful wards, felt his consciousness nearly snuffed out by the briefest touch of that terrible attention. Gabriel collapsed, the horn falling from his lips. The note ended, and with it his attempt at self-destruction. He lay gasping on the cockpit floor, tears streaming down his face, his wings singed and smoking. Covenant stared at his instruments in shock. According to every sensor on the ship, they had just been touched by the Emperor himself. The master of mankind, bound to the golden throne on distant Terra, had reached across the galaxy to intervene directly in their situation. Impossible, Covenant whispered. The Emperor has not manifested his power so openly in centuries. What are you, Gabriel Hornblower, that you would draw his personal attention twice? Gabriel had no answer. He curled into a ball on the floor, shaking with the after-effects of what he had attempted. Every part of him ached. His connection to the divine had been damaged but not destroyed by his desperate act. He existed now in a liminal state, neither fully angel nor fully mortal, caught between natures. The ship's communication system activated on its own, and a voice emerged that was not a voice but pure meaning impressed directly onto their consciousness. Both Gabriel and Covenant knew instantly they were hearing the Emperor's will made manifest, translated down into concepts their minds could barely comprehend. Bring the angel to Terra. The not voice commanded. He will be judged by my hand alone. The journey to Terra took 7 days, each one more difficult than the last. Gabriel spent most of the time in meditation, trying to repair the damage he had done to his own divine essence. His attempt at self-destruction had left cracks in his soul, fissures through which his angelic nature leaked slowly away. He could feel himself becoming less with each passing hour, his connection to the presence growing dimmer like a candle burning down to nothing. Covenant watched him with a mixture of concern and professional detachment. The Inquisitor had sent detailed reports ahead to Terra, describing everything he had witnessed. Gabriel's arrival, the deaths in the Underhive, the resurrection of the Sister of Battle, the daemon incursion at the cathedral, and finally the Emperor's direct intervention. Each event was documented with precise detail, leaving nothing to interpretation. You should eat, Covenant said on the 5th day, placing a tray of food beside Gabriel. The angel had not moved from his position in hours, sitting cross-legged with his damaged wings folded tight against his back. I do not require sustenance in the way you do, Gabriel replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. My body is sustained by grace, or it was. Now I am not certain what sustains me. You are dying, Covenant observed. It was not a question. Perhaps, Gabriel admitted. I tried to cut away my divine nature, and I may have succeeded more than I intended. Without that connection, I am nothing. An angel who cannot touch heaven is just a memory of what he once was. Covenant sat down across from him, studying the being who had caused so much chaos in such a short time. Do you regret coming to this universe? Gabriel considered the question carefully. I regret the harm I caused, the people who died because I did not understand the rules here, the instability my presence created. But I cannot regret trying to help. That is my purpose, the reason I was created. Without it, I have no meaning. Your purpose is incompatible with this reality, Covenant said bluntly. Every act of mercy creates opportunities for chaos. Every miracle undermines the faith structure that holds humanity together. You are kindness weaponized against survival itself. The words cut deeply because Gabriel knew they were true. In his universe, compassion strengthened the world. Here, it created cracks through which horrors could enter. The fundamental rules were different, and he had been too blind to see it until the damage was already done. They arrived at Terra on the 7th day. Gabriel stood at the viewport as the ship descended through layers of orbital defenses, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. The cradle of humanity spread below him, a world completely covered in cities and cathedrals and fortifications. From space, it looked like a massive fortress. Every square meter dedicated to war or worship, or both. The Imperial Palace dominated an entire continent, its walls rising kilometers into the sky. At its heart stood the Sanctum Imperialis, where the Golden Throne maintained the Emperor's half-living corpse. Even from orbit, Gabriel could feel the psychic pressure emanating from that place, a weight that pressed against reality itself. They landed on a platform reserved for the highest authorities of the Imperium. A delegation waited for them, led by members of the Adeptus Custodes in their golden armor. These were the Emperor's personal guards, warriors who had stood vigil for 10,000 years. They moved with perfect precision, forming an honor guard that was also clearly a prison detail. The shield captain approached Gabriel directly, his helmet's eye lenses glowing with assessment. "Gabriel Hornblower, you are summoned before the Master of Mankind. You will come immediately, and without resistance." Gabriel nodded, too exhausted to protest even if he had wanted to. The Custodes formed a box around him, 4 warriors in front, 4 behind, 4 on each side. They marched in perfect synchronization through corridors of such magnificence that Gabriel's damaged soul could barely process it all. They passed through checkpoints where his existence was verified against prophecies and predictions. They walked through chambers where tech priests examined him with sensors that peeled back layers of reality to see his true nature. They crossed halls where silent sisters stood watch, their null presence creating dead zones in the warp that made Gabriel feel even more disconnected from the divine. Finally, they reached the great adamantium doors that led to the throne room itself. The doors opened with a sound like thunder, revealing a space so vast it seemed to contain its own weather. Lightning flickered in the distant ceiling. The air tasted of ozone and incense and something else, something that Gabriel's angelic senses identified as the scent of martyrdom itself. At the chamber's center sat the Golden Throne, a mountain of technology and psychic architecture that defied comprehension. Upon it rested what remained of the Emperor of Mankind. His body was a withered husk, barely recognizable as human, kept alive by machines that had functioned for 10 millennia. But his psychic presence filled the entire chamber like a sun, burning with power that made Gabriel's fading grace seem like a candle beside a bonfire. The Custodes stopped at a prescribed distance. Gabriel walked forward alone, each step feeling heavier than the last. The pressure of the Emperor's attention was crushing. It felt like being examined by a force of nature, by gravity itself made conscious and turned toward judgment. He fell to his knees 20 meters from the throne, unable to proceed further under the weight of that scrutiny. Words formed in his mind, not spoken but impressed directly onto his consciousness in ways that bypassed language entirely. "Gabriel Hornblower, angel of a distant heaven, I have watched your path through my scrapless Imperium with great interest. You are an impossibility. A being from a universe where the laws of reality operate fundamentally differently than they do here." Gabriel tried to speak, but his voice failed. The Emperor's presence was too overwhelming. Instead, he formed thoughts as clearly as he could, hoping they would be understood. "I meant no harm, Lord Emperor. I only wanted to help." "I know," came the response, and there was something almost gentle in the way the concept formed. "That is what makes you so dangerous. Your intentions are pure, but your existence is catastrophic. You are order from a realm of order, thrust into a universe of barely controlled chaos. You cannot help but create instability wherever you go. Images flooded Gabriel's mind, visions of futures that might come to pass. He saw himself as a beacon of hope, drawing billions of believers away from the Emperor's light toward a gentler doctrine. Civil wars erupted as the ecclesiarchy split over whether he was saint or heretic. In the confusion and division, chaos poured through, claiming worlds by the thousand. His kindness became humanity's extinction. He saw another future, where he tried to reform the Imperium from within, making it gentler, more compassionate. But every mercy shown was a moment of weakness, exploited by enemies who knew no mercy themselves. The Tyranids consumed, the Orcs conquered, the Chaos Gods corrupted. Humanity fell not to cruelty, but to the absence of the cruel necessities that had kept it alive. He saw a third future where he accepted Chaos's offers, believing he could control their power for good. He became a champion of Tsenche, reshaping reality according to his vision of perfection. But perfection itself became corruption, and the universe unmade itself, trying to accommodate his incompatible existence. There is no path where your presence does not lead to catastrophe. The Emperor's will informed him. This is not judgment of your character, but assessment of your nature. You are a poison to this reality, not through malice, but through fundamental incompatibility. Gabriel felt tears streaming down his face. Then why did I come here? What purpose does my existence serve? That is the question I brought you here to answer, the Emperor responded. I offer you 3 paths, though none will be easy. The first vision formed, crystal clear in Gabriel's mind. He saw himself returned to his own universe, the journey reversed through cosmic forces beyond his comprehension. His memories of the Warhammer universe would fade like a half-remembered nightmare. He would continue his service to the presence, never knowing the harsh reality he had briefly touched. But the knowledge he had gained, the understanding that universes existed where kindness was catastrophic, would be lost. When similar forces eventually manifested in his own reality, he would be unprepared. The second vision showed him remaining in the Warhammer universe, but powerless. The horn would be taken from him, locked away in the deepest vaults of the Imperium, where its reality-warping abilities could do no further harm. Gabriel himself would live as a mortal human on some remote agri-world, stripped of his angelic nature, forced to experience humanity's suffering from within rather than above. He would die eventually, perhaps in 100 years, perhaps in 10, just another human life in a universe of trillions. The third vision was the darkest. Gabriel saw himself integrated into the Golden Throne's mechanisms, his essence merged with the vast psychic machinery that powered the Astronomicon. His horn's power would be channeled directly into maintaining the beacon that made human interstellar travel possible. He would save trillions through this sacrifice, but his consciousness would be trapped, aware but unable to act, for as long as the throne functioned. 10,000 years had passed since the Emperor took this burden. 10,000 more might pass before. Gabriel found release. Choose, the Emperor commanded. But understand that there is no fourth option. I have examined every possible outcome. These are the only paths that do not lead to humanity's extinction. Gabriel looked at his hands, at the golden horn that had served him faithfully across countless worlds and dimensions. The instrument that defined his purpose, his identity, his entire reason for existence. Could he truly give it up? Could he accept powerlessness when he had always been able to help? What if? Gabriel spoke aloud for the first time since entering the chamber, his voice small against the vastness around him. What if there was another way? What if the horn could be destroyed? Not locked away, but unmade completely. Interest flickered through the Emperor's presence. Explain. Gabriel's thoughts raced, forming a plan even as he spoke it. The horn operates on principles from a dimension where your warp does not exist. Its very nature violates the laws here, which is why it creates instability with every use. But it is also part of my divine essence, bound to my very soul. If I were to destroy it willingly, using the last of my angelic strength, the backlash would seal the warp rifts my presence has created. It would be a final note of correction, setting right what I made wrong. You would die. the Emperor stated flatly. Perhaps, Gabriel admitted. Or perhaps I would simply become mortal, as in your second vision, but on my own terms. The destruction would be my choice, my act of penance for the harm I caused. And the energy released might do some good, healing some of the damage I created. Silence filled the throne room as the Emperor considered this unexpected fourth option. Around them, the custodies stood motionless, waiting. The tech priests tending the golden throne continued their eternal vigil, unaware of the cosmic decision being made in their presence. It would work, the Emperor finally responded. The horn's destruction, performed with willing sacrifice, would create a wave of stabilizing energy. The warp rifts you opened would seal. The corruption you inadvertently spread would be cleansed. But the cost to you would be absolute. Your angelic nature would be burned away entirely. You would become less than mortal, barely more than a ghost of what you were. Then I would be harmless, Gabriel said, and there was something like peace in his voice. I could live out whatever life remained to me without threatening anyone. And perhaps, in my mortality, I could finally understand the people I tried to help. No longer an angel looking down, but a man looking up at the same uncaring universe. The Emperor's presence withdrew slightly, and for a moment, Gabriel felt he was being regarded not by a godlike being, but by something more human, more weary, a consciousness that had made similar sacrifices and understood their weight. You remind me of what I once was. The Emperor's thought came tinged with something that might have been sadness. Before I became this, before necessity and survival stripped away everything soft and gentle. Very well, Gabriel Hornblower. I grant you permission to walk your fourth path, destroy the horn, accept the consequences, and may you find in mortality what you could not find in divinity. Gabriel rose on shaking legs. The custodies stepped back, giving him space. He walked to the center of the vast chamber, directly before the golden throne, and raised the horn one final time. Thank you, he whispered, uncertain if he was speaking to the Emperor, the presence, or the horn itself. For everything you allowed me to do, for every life saved, every moment of grace. I am sorry I could not do more. He brought the horn to his lips and played a final note. But this was not a note of healing, or resurrection, or time manipulation. This was a note of ending, of completion, of a story reaching its conclusion. The sound was beautiful and terrible at once, a tone of such perfect clarity that it seemed the universe paused to listen. The horn began to crack in his hands. Golden light poured from the fractures, not the twisted light that had emerged when his power conflicted with this reality, but pure radiance that existed outside corruption. The light spread outward in waves, washing over Terra, spreading through the solar system, rippling outward across the galaxy itself. Wherever it touched, the damage Gabriel had caused was unmade. The warp rift sealed. The daemons were pushed back. The corrupted energy was cleansed. It was as if his entire presence in this universe was being erased, all effects of his existence carefully removed from the timeline. The horn shattered completely, and Gabriel collapsed to his knees. His wings dissolved into motes of light that faded away. The divine grace that had sustained him for eons burned out like a candle in a hurricane. He felt his angelic nature tear away from his soul, leaving behind something small and fragile and utterly mortal. When the light faded, Gabriel lay on the cold floor of the throne room, barely breathing. He was alive, but changed beyond recognition. His perfect features had become ordinary. His ageless body now bore the marks of mortality, lines and imperfections that would only increase with time. He was no longer an angel. He was barely even a man, diminished to almost nothing by the sacrifice he had chosen. The custodies approached cautiously, scanning him with their sensors. The shield captain knelt beside Gabriel's barely conscious form. "It is done, my lord," he reported to the Emperor. "The entity is neutralized." "The threat has passed." "No," came the Emperor's correction. "The angel has passed. What remains is simply Gabriel, a mortal man with memories of divinity. Take him from this place. See that he is given sanctuary on an agri-world far from the Imperium's wars. Let him live out his remaining days in peace. They carried Gabriel from the throne room, his consciousness fading in and out. He had fragments of awareness during the journey that followed, being placed in a medical facility, being examined by confused tech priests who found no trace of mutation or warp taint, just an ordinary human worn down to almost nothing. Being transported to a quiet world of golden fields and simple people who knew nothing of angels or daemons, Gabriel awoke in a small chapel, sunlight streaming through simple windows. He was lying on a cot, covered in rough blankets. The room was bare except for a wooden altar and a few benches. On the altar, carefully arranged, were the shattered fragments of his horn, preserved but powerless. A priest entered, an old man with kind eyes. "You are awake, friend. Good. You have been sleeping for 3 days. We found you outside our village, collapsed in the road. You looked like death itself." Gabriel tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The priest brought water, helped him drink. It tasted strange, too real, too physical. Gabriel realized he had never actually needed to drink before. Mortality was full of small necessities he had never experienced. "What is your name?" the priest asked gently. "Gabriel," he managed to croak. "Just Gabriel." "Well, just Gabriel," the priest smiled. "You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. We are a simple folk, but we take care of strangers. The Emperor teaches that mercy is the privilege of the strong, but I believe kindness is the duty of all." Gabriel looked at the broken horn on the altar, at this kind man who offered help without knowing who or what he was, at the simple chapel that reminded him painfully of the grand cathedrals he had inadvertently destroyed. He began to cry, great racking sobs that shook his diminished frame. The priest sat beside him, placing a weathered hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "Whatever burden you carry, friend, you do not have to carry it alone. Not here." In the months that followed, Gabriel slowly recovered enough strength to move, to work, to live, as the mortals around him lived. He helped tend the fields. He repaired fences. He learned the names of the villagers and their children. He was no longer a herald of anything. He was simply a man, perhaps the most ordinary man in a universe of trillions. He began preaching on quiet evenings, gathering whoever wished to listen in the small chapel. He spoke of mercy and compassion, of the value of each individual life, of hope in dark times. His words were simple, unadorned by divine authority or miraculous demonstration. Just one man sharing what he believed. The congregation remained small, a dozen faithful listeners at most. But they came regularly, and they listened, and slowly, carefully, they began to believe that kindness might be possible, even in a universe designed to crush it. On the altar, the fragments of the horn no longer glowed. They were just broken metal now, a memorial to what had been sacrificed. But sometimes, late at night, when Gabriel prayed in the empty chapel, he thought he felt the faintest warmth from them, as if somewhere beyond the reaches of this harsh reality, the presence still remembered him and approved of his choice. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, one powerless man preached hope to a handful of listeners. It was not much. It would probably change nothing in the grand scheme of the Imperium's endless struggle. But it was genuine, and it was his, and perhaps that was enough. The most dangerous heresy is not the one proclaimed from positions of power, but the quiet truth whispered in darkness by those with nothing left to lose. Gabriel had lost everything. His power, his purpose, his very nature. What remained was a mortal spark carrying an immortal message into a reality that had long forgotten such things were possible. And on distant Terra, upon the golden throne, the Emperor watched through the eyes of his faithful, uncertain whether this tiny flame would die, unnoticed, or grow into something that might finally, impossibly, change the universe he had fought so long to preserve.